we're live. And that means it's time for an introduction. Some people will be just listening to this in audio form later as just a regular podcast. So we're going to pretend all these visual elements aren't happening just yet.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to a brand new episode of Ideas Don't Bleed, a comics podcast presented by Ashcan Press, featuring Matthew Rosenberg, Ethan S. Parker, and Griffin Sheridan. Matthew, God, I hope you have a good guest for us this week. I really hope you've come through.
That bit really remarkably doesn't work when it's a live stream, but I like it anyway. Yeah, I think this is a very fun one. This is one we've been trying to put together for a while. And yeah, we're going to do something a little different. Normally, it's just sort of the three of us teaming up on a creator and making them feel awkward. But now we're going to do it different, and it's going to be a little roundtable because four of us are launching image books this month in March, and so I think there's a mutual admiration and respect across the board on all these creators and books.
Who are you talking to? Say some names. Who are you
Come
referring
on, we're eagerly awaiting, especially us audio listeners.
Can't see everyone's faces.
As far as the audio listeners know, it's just us.
Sure. So our guests, well, one of them is walking off camera right now.
Courtney has been napping for an hour and a half, woke up, and when she knew this was going to happen today, and now she's wandering back and forth through the frame, being like, I think I'm going to make a bagel.
She should make a bagel. So, our first guest is Tyler Boss.
My lovely wife.
And his lovely wife, Courtney, may appear with a bagel at some point. Deniz Camp is here.
Hi.
And the great Juni joined us as well.
All right, and now that we're done cheering for everybody, Griffin and I are stepping away. We're going backstage. Hey, you guys, leave this place as you found it, okay?
Sure.
Clean up after yourselves. Turn the lights off on your way out, okay? Goodbye.
Thanks, Ethan. Thanks, Griffin. That was weird. Hey guys, thanks so much for coming and chatting.
Thanks for having us. I'm excited to talk books.
Yeah, let's do it. I think the easiest thing might be for everyone just to go around and say what your upcoming book is. Might just be the easiest. Tell us a little bit about it.
You should go first, Matthew.
Yeah, exactly.
I'll go first. You know what?
Yeah.
Screw it. I have a book coming out March 26th from Image. It's myself, Stefano Landini, Roman Titov, and Jason Wordy did the coloring. Hassan Otsmain Elhau did the lettering. And it's called We're Taking Everyone Down With Us. And it is a 1970s James Bond-esque world of super spies and mad villains, power-hungry villains, but our story follows the 13-year-old daughter of the world's greatest mad scientist as she is forced to make adult choices about what to do with her life as she goes on the run with her robot bodyguard. And it's sort of a little bit of an sci-fi dark action comedy coming-of-age story and a little bit of a meditation on what it's like to follow in the footsteps of your parents and what it's like to and the way that violence sort of has a ripple effect through generations and cultures and communities and families and but it's funny. It's got jokes in it, so that sounds real depressing, but that is what the book is. So yeah, that's my book. Tyler, what's your book about?
My book's called You'll Do Bad Things, the 6-issue giallo slasher comic. I should say slasher comic in the style of giallo movies. It's written by me with art by Adriano Turluscini. Turlucci. Sorry, Adriano, I'm still working on the Turtu. He's Italian. And lettering by Hassan. I think Hassan did lettering on all our books, yes?
New books.
Except for June. Yeah, except for June.
Oh, Juni, did you do your own lettering?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
It's good.
So the whole shebang across. We'll get to so everybody but Juni's. But yeah, and it's a nasty book about stuff.
There you go. Nasty pick about stuff.
No, come on.
It's yeah, you're right. I can do it better. It's Death Note by way of Dario Argento. It's a former true crime writer. 10 years have passed since his smash hit book chronicling the nursery rhyme killer was published, and he's decided he no longer likes operating in that genre, and so he tries to write romance novels now. But every time he sits down to write a new story, he always ends up killing his characters, and worse yet, those characters start dying in real life.
Yeah.
Um,
It's super dope. It's like adaptation. It's like adaptation, but like a slasher movie, which is the highest praise I can possibly pay. That's awesome.
Thank you. Yeah, my third favorite Nicolas Cage movie.
That's pretty good. That's what's number one?
Vampire's Kiss.
Wow. Wow. Okay.
Wow, I was not expecting that. Okay.
No, I'm just kidding. I don't know what order we're on, but so I don't know if it makes sense. We're in a clockwise order. So Juni or Dennis? I'm done.
Okay.
Yeah, Juni, you want to go?
Yeah, sure. I feel like the cover actually explains it pretty well in terms of tone. Well, wait, actually, you can't see anything. Never mind.
Oh my god, it's amazing. The only thing not blurred is the your face here.
Yeah.
It was pretty cool.
Yeah, so it's called Monkey Meat. It's technically the second volume of it, but it's an anthology series, so you can pretty much just pick up whatever issue and you won't be lost. It takes place on an island controlled by a corporation, and the island is a fantasy West African land, basically. So every story is about someone who lives on the island trying to figure out how to survive what's essentially late stage capitalism, but with like very supernatural, very Adult Swim, Cartoon Network elements to it. So like even just among the favorites of the ones that I have in the new batch of stories, there's a Senegalese middle class family trying to fight for their Airbnb against a demon. You have a very old Viking warrior who, after a lifetime of dedication to protecting the temple, the company shows up one day and is like, well, actually, you're not going to get your retirement, your Valhalla, because the company has actually bought the temple. So you lose your job. And as the very old, out-of-step Viking, you have to figure out how to get a new job if you want to keep living. So it's a story about like the loss of a job and the loss of faith at the same time. So a lot of the stories tend to revolve around that kind of like what it's like, sort of a catharsis of what it's like living in the world today, but with a very cartoony and very fantastical tone, and a lot of like West African elements added onto it to give it the sort of like I guess post-colonial angle that I tend to put in my work anyway, every time that I'm working on something. So yeah, that pretty much covers it. It's a book that I find funny because a lot of the reviews tend to be positive, but also like I have no idea how to explain this book to you.
Yeah.
It's not just the stories. It's also like there's fake commercials, there's articles, there's like pages dedicated to making you discover new art that you won't necessarily know because mainstream American media doesn't really look into this stuff. So yeah, it's a bunch of like stuff.
I was really in love with in the first issue of the new ones. You have the one page about that movie, and I was like, I don't know, I can't tell if this is a real movie or not. And I had to Google it and was like, oh, cool, it's a real movie. I need to go see it. But like the book is so immersive that you never know if you're like seeing an ad for something in the world or you're actually talking about something in our world. It's really a fun blurring.
Okay, cool.
Sorry, not to stop from Dennis going. I just wanted. In the first issue you have like an advertisement that's almost like a big grinder that's just sort of distilling everything, and that almost feels like a great encapsulation. When I first read that, it was weird because it almost felt and I'm probably wrong here, but almost felt antagonistic towards yourself in a weird way, where it was like, it's the obvious critique on like sort of the like grinding up and regurgitating the material as a, more easily digestible content from the company. But then also in some ways in the totality of the series, which is sort of you exploring all these different genres and themes and things, everything's sort of being ground through your process and like thought on the thing. It almost, I don't know, it was like for whatever reason, that image struck me as a sort of all-encompassing image.
Yeah, that works. Yeah, I'm done.
So,
Deniz.
yeah, my book is called Assorted Crisis Events. It's with Eric Zwadsky, Jordi Belair, and Hassan as well. He's letting all the rest of our books anyway. And it is, in one sentence, it is Crisis on Infinite Earths if it was happening to normal everyday people, or it is Black Mirror if time and space were breaking down. So, like Monkey Meat, it's an anthology. Every issue is its own story. Unlike Monkey Meat, which is every issue is now 3 stories. But each issue we were able to do one story, and they all kind of connect. They're all kind of connected in various ways, and they're all taking place in the world as people try to wrestle with this different manifestations of the crisis in time, which means they might get trapped in time loops, or take a wrong turn into the wrong century, or or encounter their doppelganger from another dimension, trying to live in their apartment. And so every issue is a complete done in one story.
I guess my first question, and this is more for Juni and Deniz, is like, I find coming up with the story to be it's sort of the most difficult part, right? It's like that's where most of the work is for me to start. And you guys doing anthology books where you're just doing a ton of stories, why? It just seems harder. Like, why did you make your job harder?
Well, yeah, I think I know what Deniz's answer is going to be. So, like, go ahead.
No, I don't. No, you can't lead me in that way. You tell me what my answer is going to be.
Because like I asked him, because like when he started talking to me about this book, he was like, "Yeah, I already have like 50 story ideas," which even for me, I thought that was insane.
Yeah.
And then he sort of gave me how, like, the trick of how he does it, and I've been sort of doing it, and like now I get it. Now I get how you can come up with a lot of stuff very, not easily, but like basically you look at the world around you.
Yeah.
And it was already the case for Monkey Meat, like being inspired by stuff, but now it's like even just a tiny nugget of a concept, you put it on a page somewhere in a notebook, and it's going to turn into a story at some point.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And there's a lot, especially now, like that you can mine stories from. Just you open like a website of the news, and you get enough stories for months. It's insane.
Well, and any small thing in your life can be interesting. I mean, like anything that feels that's funny to you, or that's sad to you, or that's anything that's happening to you, anything that you see that moves you, like it's all, you can all make, like, it doesn't need to be such a rich idea or a concept that it needs 6 issues or it needs to be a novel. It's just like you can take that whatever it is, that small thing that you see, that moment, that feeling that you have, and you can turn it into, at least I think you can turn it into a story, and hopefully have it have a beginning, middle, and end, and and then if it's not that good, you can try again next issue. Like, which I do my best to make every one of them as good as I can, but there's also a certain amount of freedom of, like, you can just try things, and maybe it won't work every time.
Don't mean to tie it to like other people's work, but there's a collection of Chester Brown comics. I think it's called Little Man is the collection, and in it, one of the first stories is called The Toilet Paper Revolt, and the idea is it was supposed to be like a disaster, like a 70s style disaster movie. And he was I think it was just post Ed the Happy Clown, and it was gonna be his big next comic, and it ended up being, he's like, oh, I love this story, but it's 2 pages. Like, it can't. This idea cannot sustain.
Exactly.
And I think, like, it's interesting, like with sort of crisis events, like Deniz, you kind of have this whole, you have this this sandbox you've built, right? You're like, here's the sandbox, and then which corner do we want to play in? And you can kind of, I sent you a note about this after I read issue 5, but the first 4, I was like, man, these are really heartfelt and stuff, but a lot of them they're like, I can't imagine what it's like writing them, because when I finish an issue, it's hard to go and read the next issue. It's like I need to take a break. And then I think issue not to jump ahead in this year, but
No.
there's a certain issue that I read where it was maybe the most sort of uplifting, even after dealing with some heavy. And and it's an interesting thing where you kind of watch through the series where there is this constant thread of obviously things you and Eric and Jordy and Haas are working through in your own lives emotionally, right? And you can kind of see, not that we're following an emotional thread, like you can track it each, like, oh, on Monday Dennis was sad about this, but like you can kind of see like there's
sure.
ebbs and flows to it. Yeah. And then sorry.
No, continue, please.
No, I'm done.
No, I
I'm done talking about you, Dennis.
I think this, like this book in particular for me, and this is like the least appealing thing to say about a comic, I think, but it's really like it was really born of the pandemic and like a lot of there has not been a lot of post-pandemic literature or entertainment because I think people hated that time. I think it was deeply traumatic and we have not processed that as individuals or as a group in general. And so I think some of this book is processing that, and like some issues is more obvious than others, obviously, but like I think issue 2 in particular, where that deals with like a meat packing plant, is like, it's like pretty obvious what I was feeling in that moment, and you hope that and I think it's true of all of our books, is like they're all personal in some ways. Like as you're describing them, I read the first issue, as you're describing like what they're about, I can see a lot of you guys in them, and like that's part of what we're doing, and that's like one of the things that you can do at Image that maybe you are maybe less inclined to be as raw or as personal or as open at other countries or in other companies, but at Image at least I feel like I want to put as much of myself into the work as I can.
Sure. Juni, coming off the back of that, I feel like, and I could be wrong about this, but it feels like you work incredibly fast, like in a way that I'm so jealous. But it's like, okay, like, so it's a twofold. Like, A, is that true? And then B, is that, do you find that helpful in the sense where it's like, especially with Monkey Meat, like each issue contains 2 stories minimum. I can't even remember. Was it 3 every single one? But then there's the games, and then there's the, my favorite, the door. Which I love so much as a recurring motif. But it feels like a way that you're like, you can very quickly have an idea of like, oh, I don't know if you process emotion through work or how you relate to your work as far as that sort of stuff goes, but it feels like that's such a benefit in Monkey, where you can touch on a ton of different things just because of, your ability to it almost seems like it sprouts out of the ground fully formed.
So as far as the speed goes, I'm not supposed to say. I've been advised to not reveal too much about like how long it takes me to just to avoid like especially editors taking advantage.
Yeah,
Sure.
But that tells you all you need to know. Without saying anything, he said it all, right? Like,
But yeah, like there is an element of like it's a very raw thing, especially on Monkey Meat. Like it's like all my other books, especially like the graphic novels like Mobilis and stuff, like they tend to take a lot more time. On Monkey Meat, it's more like the story. It sort of like rolls in my head for months before I put it on the page. But when I start putting it on the page, a 15-page story can be drawn in like 2 weeks stops. But I've had like a lot of like mulling over what the story is about, where the story steps go, what the takeaway could be from the thing as well. Like in issue 2 of this new batch, there's the second story, the one about Lug going back in time with the sort of like early caveman type people.
Yeah.
I think I made Deniz read it. I made Aditya read it. I made Haas and my girlfriend read it because I like sending that stuff to people because it comes out so fast out of my brain that like I'm not even sure if the thing actually works.
Mm-hmm.
And I spend literally months just changing dialogue over and over again because I'm like, this isn't conveying the thing that I wanted it to convey. The end of the first issue, there's a page with a final message to the reader, that used to be a full page of text. Now it's like a few lines. Like at the time when I sent it to Deniz, it was a full page of text. And I was like, this is too much. Like but that comes from the fact that like my brain needs to be able to express all this stuff because I latched onto a subject. I needed to express a lot of things about it, and the story is an outlet to be able to take that out. And what? Stop. Sorry, she's just like piercing through the. Yes. But yeah, so it's literally monkey meat is an outlet. Like I needed to sort of like everything in the world that I find interesting and that I want to do research on, it turns into a story and it ends up in monkey meat in a very short format that like sort of like it's someone wanted to like gut punch you and at the same time telling you something about something going on in the world and then they just disappear.
Well, it's such pure comics. I mean, really like I think comics are so good at the proposition. I always say that rather than the exposition, and so I feel like Monkey Meat is just it's so pure comics to me. I love it.
I'm wondering, Monkey Meat is weird because it feels, I don't know, it feels like a bit of like a journal comic. It feels like it has that intimacy, but then you're on a crazy island where a corporation is, grinding people up and doing all these things and reincarnating people to work all the time, but yet it still has this intimacy that I think is really disarming and wonderful. And so like your process on it makes sense. I'm sort of curious for all of you. Something I've been thinking a lot about with this new book is like it is a very personal book for me, and I think a personal book for Stefano. And I can't speak for Stefano on how he feels, but he seems to really like it, and he seems
because
to
you can't speak Italian.
I can't speak
Italian. Yeah.
No, I do not. He's very apologetic about his English, and I was like, I understand you perfectly, and I can't say more than a sentence in Italian, so I really don't ever want you to apologize to me again. But yeah, the thing I think a lot about lately is this idea of like who the work is for when we make something. And I very much am making a book for me. Like I'm writing about stuff that I'm working through. I'm making jokes that like I think I could make the jokes broader, but I don't like broader jokes usually. So I'm making the jokes a little more narrow. I'm making it a little more to my taste. And obviously I don't feel bad about that, but I find that I don't think about the audience at all anymore. Which is not a thing when I do corporate work or whatever. When I do a superhero book, like I'm very aware of the audience, which maybe is a problem, but I am. And I'm wondering how you guys feel about when you make something. Like, do you think about the audience, and at what point do you do that? Like when it's out, are you like, well, it's theirs now to interpret, or are you just? I'm always curious when people are like, when the reader interprets the work, and you're like, do you feel like you could be like, that's not correct, or do you be like, well, that's the interpretation, and that's what they got out of it, and that's theirs to have? I never have a good landing point on that.
I mean, I'm gonna answer and then throw in because I sent a similar note to Deniz one time where I was like worried. Speaking about like in times of you go to when superheroes comics started, it was a reaction to World War II and a push against sort of the darker pulp novels of the time. And what is that for? It's because people are looking for escapism, XYZ, and kind of track fiction across history and what's going on geopolitically and what are the trends of that. It's almost always in hindsight. I feel like that's not something you can actively consider when you're trying to make something, because for instance, in Bad Things, like I'm making a slasher comic, but it's also like all the like there's certain kills in it that are like things that I have not done. Fantasized. Yeah, done. No, but like there's real fears of like, there's one in the 4th issue that opens it. That's one of the things that like when I wake up in the middle of the night, think is happening to me. And so it's like you put that in there to see if it's, because I feel like you put the most personal stuff in the work, and normally that ends up being the best stuff. But I had sent a note to Deniz at one point being like, I'm scared that a sort of crisis event is not going to get the broadest possible audience it should get because the work is so good, just because you're dealing with such important makes it sound,
I get you,
but big, and these things,
weighty.
and like, and that like people, literacy already being what it is in at least the States, like let's add on, like let's deal with heady topics and these different things. But Deniz had an incredible response to my angst for him.
I think I do consider the audience, but it's not like not to try to give them what they want. It's more like it's some combination of myself and some kind of idealized version of the audience that I have in my head. So how will this come across, and like how can I make this as truthful as I can, not just to me, but I think in a universally understood sort of way, right? Because it's not, it's not just about me and what I like. It's how can I make people feel the thing that I want them to feel, or how can I make them feel something? How can I show them something real and true? And if I can do that, then if I can do that as clearly as I can, then I think people will respond to it, or I hope people will respond to it. So far, people have responded to that, and the more truthful I can be, the more people have responded to it, I think. So that's really my main thing. And I think, that's not to say that I don't consider the audience, because I do think a lot about how like how we do something is going to come across. Like will it be effective in this? Will it make people, so I think about that quite a lot, and how to be clearer. But I don't necessarily, like you said, I don't necessarily worry that my first image book was a book called 20th Century Men, where it was like about the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan, which is just something that people are not interested. Like in the 1980s, it was like a 1980s book, but like that made use of the 1980s nostalgia, not even an iota. You know what I mean? And
it's not exactly Stranger Things.
Right.
You'd be like, it's 80 nostalgia bait, and you're like, oh, like Ghostbusters, and you're like, no.
I mean, like maybe Ghostbusters was playing in the background at some point. Like it's possible, I guess, but no. And so it was. I think as long as you're as specific as you can be, then people respond to that, even if they don't have like any built-in nostalgia for like Soviet era industrial equipment,
Yeah. I sort of wonder also, like, when we're talking about these books being very personal, is there a point where you guys do put things in your book or come up with things that you then are like, this is more than I want to share, this is more than I want to put in the book?
I don't, but because there's not because like anything goes, but because there's just a line I'm not tempted to cross. So like there's plenty of examples of like, like people, a lot of authors do that. They mine from their personal life to the detriment of their personal life. Like Friends, and I think his wife, when they were divorced, was like, and you stole our life for your novels. Like, and it's like without my permission, when I specifically said not to, and I think I have, I know people who do that, and I think as long as you like deform your work, deform it enough, I think that's okay, like as long as it happened to you. But I've never gone too far, but only because I'm not a brave enough person to go that far.
Or self-destructive enough.
Half dozen of one, six of the other. So.
Juni, do you ever have stuff that you start to do and then are like, I don't want to share this, I want to keep this for monkey meat?
So a lot of the stuff that's personal that I put in my books is hidden behind so many layers of fiction that unless you were present in the room with me and whoever else, you wouldn't know that this piece of dialogue was lifted from an actual conversation. And like Mobilis is a good example. Like there's discussions that I've had with someone where those are the exact sentences. But the fact that I'm using fiction also means that I can shift the perspectives of like taking elements of myself, put them in a character, taking elements of another person, put them in another character, but also take elements of whoever, myself, someone else, and mix them together to form a character. You can do that in a way that, like, if you were just telling the story of something that happened to you, it just becomes a sort of selfish statement of something that happened to you. Whereas fiction makes it more, I'm going to try and reassess why it happened, how it happened, the dynamics at play. It forces you to view it from the perspective of every character in the room and not just yourself, because it's not just yourself anymore. It's you are pieces of yourself are in that character and that one, and when they're talking to each other, it forces you to understand it all.
Yeah.
So I find fiction really useful for that, and I also have this rule that, like, the whole thing of not sharing stuff that might ruin people's life and stuff. Like, my grandfather was a guy who, both my grandparents, they went through the independence movement in Senegal in the 60s. They were both, like, really, like, big brained, large people with, like, loads of stories to tell. And my grandfather told us, like, I don't want to leave, like, a book or a recording of what I have to say about it, when he wanted to talk about it. And he said that because it's not just my story, it's also the story of those other people who were there, who their account would be different. They would disagree. They would be hurt if you reveal something that they didn't want people to know. Like, there's a lot of reasons to avoid sharing stuff that ultimately isn't just yours.
Sure.
But when you do it with fiction, you can approach it in different ways. You can shift your perspective. You can add elements that weren't necessarily there in the moment, but are relevant to the thing that you want this account of events to be about. Like, there's a lot of, like,
sounds like you process stuff with your work, which is cool.
Yeah. There's a lot of that. Like, and even in Monkey Mate, like, most of the characters have nothing to do with me, but every story has an element of myself in there. Like, I can relate on, like, the story of the scientist who goes to the point of going to the land of the dead to bring her lover back is based on personal experience. Even the character who loses her job, the Senegalese family who wants to fight for their Airbnb because they think we paid for this, so we are owed. It's all based on, like, people I know or my own thoughts and situations. There's a lot of that in there, and the audience doesn't really factor all that much. It's more about if it comes from a, like Deniz said, like, if it comes from a sort of true human place in you, you're gonna find an echo somewhere. And it's very surprising sometimes, because you're like, you make a story and you think no one's gonna want to read this, no one's gonna like this, and someone shows up with the book at a signing and they're like, this is my favorite part of the book.
Yeah.
And, like, that's nice. That's really nice.
Yeah, I think about that a lot with the book Tyler and I do, What's the First Place from Here, because we went. Thank you, thanks to everyone in the crowd for cheering. It's a book that, you know, we made Four Kids Walking to a Bank, which was kind of a broader book, and then we started another book that was very similar to Four Kids Walking to a Bank, and I you know, we had this long conversation as we were
Five kids walking to a bank.
I mean, yeah, it was.
Four and
We
a half.
added. We had a half a kid.
Body horror.
It was horrifying. Yeah. But we didn't play it that way. It was just funny that it was half a kid. But we had this other thing, and it was like Four Kids Walking to a Bank, but like a little more sci-fi. And I remember just having this talk with Tyler where I said, you know, we're in our Four Kids Walking to a Bank worked for us. Like, we enjoyed making it, and I think the audience enjoyed reading it because we were pushing ourselves. And now we know how to do this, and we're no longer pushing ourselves doing it.
Exactly.
Like, we need to reinvent what we're doing. And so for this place is this very, like, we made a list of stuff that we didn't know how to do. And we're like, let's do this. Let's do this sprawling world building, open world, ongoing series with, like, a huge cast, and, like, really not explain what the premise is for, you know, the whole first arc, basically. And just, you know, just kind of, like, do this thing. And you know, we were really excited about that. And then we hit a point where I said, you know, we're going to lose a lot of readers. Like, we're going to just shed them like crazy. And we were like, yeah, but it's what we want to do. And so let's do it. And what happens is that the people who do come out and are still reading our book 20 issues in, it connects with them so much more, because they're like, oh, this is a strange personal piece of work that you guys are making, and it's so weird and different. And so like every Furthest Place reader I feel like a real kinship with, because I'm like, yeah, you must have a lot of the same baggage we have. You must have a lot of the same weird hangups and obsessions and all the things that make that book work for us. Like, and that's a nice feeling. I sort of wonder with all you guys, like, are there things in your books when you make them? I mean, I guess this is sort of a continuation of the last question, but like, are there things in your books when you make them that you're hoping people grab onto, that you're like, I really hope people get this out of the book? And like, you know, is there something that you want to get across in the book that you don't explicitly say? Like, obviously there's like the major themes and the plots that you hope people understand, but like sort of subtextual stuff or like ideas in there that you ever just like really hoping that find an audience?
I guess just for me, there's just like one kind of for all of them, which is just to feel a little bit less alone, I guess.
Sure.
That's like that you are understood, or that somebody else is going through something that can recognize what you're going through. Yeah. I think that's kind of all my books are like that, or you hope that even the ultimates.
Sure.
I almost feel like, and when you ask that question, in some ways it kind of even relates to our first book, not like 4Kids. Like, I think the thing I'm most interested in is seeing the reaction to the end of the story.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm sort of looking at and thinking about the ends to all of and I'm like, oh, those are weird endings. Like, that's not most people are going to find satisfying. And so like finding the people who, I think it's almost like it's like seeing if people are, not that and the endings are a joke, but seeing if people are going to, you know, laugh at the punchline.
Sure.
For lack of a better metaphor.
Juni's cat has something to say.
Yeah, it's the time of night where she's extremely like hype,
frisky.
Yeah. I mean, let's see. It's funny because like working on Monkey Meat is sort of like tuning out everything else.
Mm-hmm.
Even now, like it's the book that I kept in my schedule as I'm gonna make Boy Wonder, I'm gonna make The Hulking Wood, and then I'm gonna make Monkey Meat. So Boy Wonder was like me processing childhood trauma, basically,
sure.
And using Batman characters to do it. The audience really did not factor all that much in the process. Mm-hmm. Hulking Wood was also processing stuff, but it was more so like the 2020 onwards, sort of a post-therapy type book, I guess. And Monkey Meat is like just there's so many stuff in the world that you want to be able to make stories about, just like use this outlet to do it. And I guess the non-verbal takeaway I would want for people to get is more like there's the catharsis of it. It's feeling a kinship to all those different types of characters and their different types of profiles and mindsets. So it's also why I guess I tend to try to make those stories more human. Mm-hmm. So even the one where you have a cyborg fit girl who's sprinting through town and destroying everything because her body has been enhanced so much that she's like overpowered now. And even that story tends to revolve more about telling you who she is, where she came from, why she did all those enhancements, and the consequences of it now in this specific moment. Mm-hmm. So there's the catharsis of it. And then there's the idea, I guess, that I want people who get Monkey Meat to sort of get this sense of this is a book that's trying to connect, I guess. Mm-hmm. Like, as much as it like comes from myself, it's sort of like there's a page where I talk about AI as an interview between a human journalist and an actual AI, talking about how we AI are the future because basically you can make anything you want tailored to your specific taste as an individual, and why wouldn't you not want that? Mm-hmm. And the argument of the journalist is art is a human making something for other humans to connect to and start a conversation, and you don't have to agree with what they say, but like the fact that you can have that conversation with them is valuable. And making something that just is tailored exactly for you, the way that basically the fanboy's wet dream, I guess, of like, this blockbuster movie, I can change it however I want to fit the things that I want to see. But at that point, you're losing connection to anyone else who sees the film because you haven't seen the same thing and you can't engage in it with it the same way. So I guess the book is sort of an advocate for that, like the connection between humans and the value in interacting with art that comes from outside of those very corporate spheres now, where everything seems to have been bought. Like James Bond is basically an Amazon. I'm not going to use a curse word. But yeah, so that's why I have art recommendations in Monkey Meat as well. Like I added pages where I recommend movies, websites about books, art by artists that I find interesting. It's because I want you to be able to sort of like interact with stuff that was made by people, to connect with other people, and that I'm pretty sure no corporation would want to buy the rights to the stuff that I'm sharing on Monkey Meat. It is not marketable stuff. It is human, raw, often African stuff that has value as an artistic endeavor, not as a commercial one.
Yeah, it's you're talking about sort of the role of art and the way it's a conversation between two people. It's a conversation between an artist and a audience member. And I there was a quote, and I don't remember who said it. It was just someone arguing with a comics fanboy online, and the comics fan was arguing about like, you're here to make what we want. And I remember the person who said the quote said, I don't know what to tell you. Like, I can't imagine going into a work of art, approaching a work of art, and not hoping that it changes you. Like, that's how you should approach every work of art, that you're going to come out of it a different person on the other side. You're going to be expressed something you didn't think of, that you didn't know. And I think it's really fascinating that we're in, like, not to get into culture war stuff, but like, we're in this time period where that is a major argument that's happening. Like, is the role of art to give you exactly what you want, or is the role of art to give you something you didn't know you wanted? And I feel like artists tend to be on one side of that argument almost universally. But it is fascinating to deal with an audience who goes into things wanting something specific and getting annoyed if they don't get that thing. And I think that's
consumerism,
strange.
though. That's not art. That's what we're dealing. We're talking about two different things. Is why there's any kind of debate. Like, that's not to say that the culture war that you're talking about isn't real. But I think one group of people is saying this is not art, this is content, and another group of people are saying no, this is art. And you're absolutely right that if art should change you, and this is a group of people that who think otherwise, and I think they're talking about content and and they think it's just another product, like a loaf of bread or a Tonka truck, and I understand that because we live in an incredibly hyper capitalist age, or this post capitalism, whatever you want to call it, and so I understand it, but it's not. It has nothing to do with art, in my opinion. And I think it was Alan Moore who said, if the audience knew what they wanted, they'd be the writer, or they'd be the artist, not the audience. And it's like the artist's job is to give people something they didn't know they wanted, as you said, Matt. So.
Yeah, I'm wondering. We've all done sort of corporate work where you're talking about the consumerism versus art. Like, obviously everything, our book, Image is amazing. Image is an incredibly empowering place for artists. I honestly do believe, and I say this a lot, that Image is the best deal you're going to get in the arts. It's the most supportive place you can be as an artist. Like, I don't think there's free. I don't think there's a film studio. I don't think there's a record label. I don't think there's a book publisher. I don't think there's a gallery that will give you what Image provides to us. But at the end of the day, we are making a product that we need people to buy. There is a commercial element to what we do. We're printing them up. We're saying, hey, can you order this? And but the four of us have all done corporate work, and I wonder, like, is it different? Is it different for you doing Boy Wonder or The Ultimates or Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle stuff? Or Tyler, were you not aware that you drawn Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles?
All 8 pages that I've written.
Well, I also know things that you're doing coming up, Tyler, but I'm not allowed to talk about those. But you are doing other corporate work. I'm sorry.
Sure.
I'm
gonna lose all my cool guy points.
Yeah, your cool guy points. You can't hold on to those.
Oh,
sorry, buddy. You sold out, and I'm going to call you out on that. But like, do you feel like
they're going to call you Millhouse now? Sorry.
Do you feel like your work is different? Do you feel like your image books? Do you approach them differently? Do you approach them more or less? Do you approach them less commercially or not? I guess.
I approach them differently. Sorry to start. I approach them differently. I think about this a lot. I approach them. At no point does the fact that it's a corporate work enter into like the creative part of any of the books. I think for me, I don't think that has any. I understand it that it's there, that the audience might respond one way or another, but it's not driving me. But I think the thing about image is you have such freedom to not just in the kind of stories that you can tell, but in the way that you can tell them. So I think I can be incredibly ambitious, let's say, at image in a way that is difficult in the big two. Not because they won't let me do this technical thing, although I've heard people say that they get stopped from trying formal stuff. But there's also the kind. What can you talk about? Can you get a little bit? Can you talk about real human stuff that's kind of messy and dirty and sexy and ugly and all that stuff? And not only that, but how many pages do you have to do it in? And can you add those 2 pages or 3 pages or 5 pages that you need to tell that story in just the right way? Image is the only place that lets you do that. So I think for me, it's just a matter of how far can you push things, how truthful can you go, and how kind of not worrying about plot. Like, I worry a little bit less about plot and all that stuff, not just because I know that I can get that stuff through at Image and I can't get that stuff through anywhere else.
Sure. Tyler, Juni, do you feel like there's a difference in your image work or these books and the sort of more corporate stuff you've done?
I'm gonna let Tyler go. He seems to have an idea already.
Well, I think it's interesting. I don't know if you all think about it this way, but sometimes, like, after the initial excitement that is the idea, right? Whatever the project is, whatever the thing you need to work on, after you get past that initial spark, the way at least my mind processes it, and this is kind of whether writing, graphic design, art, is just from, this is a problem, how do I solve it? And then the constraints, because I think I really like storytelling under constraints, because I think given carte blanche, you can kind of sometimes spread yourself too thin, or kind of lose the plot, for, to use an obvious metaphor. But the
literally lose the plot.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so, like, even in say, like, working with a licensor, right, on a licensed project, sometimes the constraints can breed things you otherwise wouldn't have gotten at. And so, like, while I'm working on bad things and exploring things there and the way that I write there, it's different from, say, like, okay, yes, I am writing another corporate property after that, and the way I approached that was based around different constraints. Okay, I have 24 pages, I have to have X, Y here. What's the core theme I'm trying to talk about? What's the sort of genre constraints that work inside of there, and then how do we play with those things? So I wouldn't say it's a difference in emotionality of how you approach it, but I think it's a difference in the set of problems you have to solve. Shifts would be the way I think about it.
Yeah, I view it as a sort of too many cooks in the kitchen type deal, where like, he knows. I've complained about a lot of stuff to Deniz. I have way too much ammo on me now. But yeah, so basically, the best corporate comics experience I've had is probably Boy Wonder. I was pretty much allowed to do what I wanted. I was given like limits on don't go too far from what people usually expect those characters to be like. So like the dynamic between Jason and Damien was supposed to be a bit different, and I was told like keep them more contentious because that's what people expect. Like that's usually how they're characterized, and that in fact turned into what you was talking about of like it actually turned into a better story for it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and it doesn't always happen like that because the image of the cooks is that imagine if you were a chef and you have the guy who owns the restaurant who wants to tell you what you're supposed to make because the restaurant has a brand that you're supposed to adhere to. Then you also have the people who are supposed to eat your food who show up in the kitchen to tell you the last time I made that meal, it had these ingredients in it, and they have to be in there. But you also have another guy next to him saying, those ingredients are always there. I'm tired of it. You need to make something else. And so there's a lot of different people telling you what you should be doing. And like working on your own personal work, you don't get that. And there's also just the reception of it. I find that especially on Boy Wonder, where the whole goal for me was, it was a stealth. It was almost a stealth image book, in that I did a personal story about like stuff that I have been processing since I was 10 years old. The story about Talia, it doesn't exist because of Talia. It exists because I needed to do my own personal family research of like asking questions about this stuff that happened in our family. Why? What's the childhood of that family member? And I used those elements and applied them to the psychology of Talia based on how she usually is in the comics. And I did that for every character. Every one of them is a mix of myself or people that I know and my own history, mixing that with the usual core elements of every one of those characters. And the feedback that I get from it is twofold. Either it comes from, and I think those are the best ones, it's the feedback from people who don't know those characters. Because they just read the book as a book and they tell you this worked or didn't work for those reasons that have to do with the actual storytelling, the style or whatever. And the feedback that comes from the fans who've been reading those characters over and over again for however long, regardless of whether the feedback is positive or negative, you appreciate it because you appreciate the passion that comes with it. But as a creator, it's not really useful because they're just comparing it to other versions and whether or not they agree with your adherence or lack of adherence to those other versions.
Yeah.
And with your creator-owned stuff, it doesn't happen. You just have the feedback of a smaller audience, but a much more like invested in your specific book and story rather than the brand and whether or not you were doing the brand right, I guess.
Sure. It's funny that I think a lot about. I was very close to my father when he was still alive, and I would give him all my work. And when I was writing Uncanny X-Men, there's an issue that ends, and all the X-Men seem to die. They don't all die. They do die later, but they don't all die in that moment. And then Cyclops shows up, and he's not in costume, and he just walks out, and he's wearing red glasses, and it's the return of Cyclops, and he's been missing for a long time. And I gave it to my father, and he talked to me about how much he liked the book and what he thought of it and all this stuff. And then he said to me, he was like, I have one question. He's like, that guy who appears at the end with the red glasses. And I said, yeah. And he said, what percentage of your audience, of your readership, is going to know who that character is?
No.
And I was like, on an X-Men book? I was like, 100 out of 100. Like, it's a full, every single person who reads this comic is going to recognize Cyclops. Yeah. And he was like, oh. He's like, because it's a very intense moment. I had no idea who the fuck he was. And I was like, it was some of the nicest praise I ever got, because it was based on the merit of the work and not the merit of the characters that, you know, go back to Stan and Jack and those guys. So yeah, it is funny to do the corporate work and give it to people who don't care about corporate work and see how they feel is like a real litmus test on these things sometimes. Yeah.
That's pretty much what I do every time, regardless of the book. I put it in the hands of someone who doesn't know what it is, and ask like, "What do you take away from this? That's this work, basically."
Yeah. So another question that I sort of struggle with is dealing with who we are as creators and writers. And I'm doing a new book, and everybody teases me that the title's long, and they say, "Oh, your titles, your books are always long," and I go, "Yeah, they are long." And then someone the other day was like, "Oh, it has all the things you do in a book that I like." And that, of course, sent chills up my spine, where I was like, what do I do? Like, you're just really trying to figure out what. And I guess the question is, like, how do you guys fall on, like, what is your style, or what are the themes you keep coming back to, and what are tropes that you fall into? Like, how do you know when you're doing something that are like, that's a signature Tyler move, or that's a signature Deniz move, or a signature Juni move, and how do you not just be like, I keep doing the same things over and over in my book? Like, where do you land on that?
I'm sure I do it, but I don't. There's like, I mean, and when I'm drawing, there's things that I like to do, but that's just because I think they're effective storytelling mechanics. And not that, like, like I really, for whatever reason, I think like a great panel is setting the camera, or the viewer's eye on a horizontal plane and having two characters standing full figure looking at each other on a flat. Like, I just think it's such a, like, and that is like, I don't think there's ever been a story of comics that I haven't employed that at least like 3 times. But as far as like themes and things like that, that's a thing that I think you learn about. It's like you said, I don't think I have enough under my belt yet to know beyond like composition.
Have you found things in Bad Things where you're like, oh, I've sort of did this in Dead Dogs Bite, or I did this or we do this in Furthest Place? Because I'm sure there is Furthest Place, but
yeah, I'm sure there is, but I don't look at once it's finished, I don't super look at my work again in a really critical lens. I kind of, like a shark, just keep moving forward.
Sharks never look at their work again.
They don't. They go, ah.
They're done. Yeah, no, I get that. Juni, Deniz, do you have stuff that you feel like you do too often, or you do as a trademark? And
so it's not, for me, it's like, it's not that I think there's stuff that I'm becoming known for, and then I'm very resistant to that. Like, I think like I'm probably like the political superhero guy now, and I don't want to be that guy. I don't want to be any guy. So I have thought about this a lot, and like that's why.
Well, why don't you want to be any guy?
Because stuff bores me. Like like I will get tired. I'm not interested enough in any one genre or any one topic or whatever for that to be defining for me, or to want to continue to do that for the rest of my career. Like it just kind of happened that way, that I did like a lot of war politics superhero books in this period because of what I got. One thing that I did creator own, and then the others kind of just fell into my lap. And then like so for me, like one of the exciting things about Astoria Crisis events in general is the ability to reinvent myself, not just with that project, but every issue of that project, to create a new voice and to create a new storytelling system, a new storytelling language with Eric and Jordy and everybody, and to start over again, and to start from zero again. Like, and I hope my Martian Manhunter book doesn't read like Ultimates, doesn't read like Astoria Crisis events, because they'll be running concurrently.
It doesn't, but sure.
It doesn't, yeah.
Okay. And like I like trying different things, and I think as soon as you get used to it, like as soon as you get used to a tool, as soon as you get good at using it, is when you should throw it away. Another Alan Moore quote. And I've tried
not true of carpenters.
No, not true of that would be a very short career, I think.
Yeah.
I'm finally good at this. All right, see you later. So I think, and then of course the stuff comes back, but it's like, you kind of get, I don't know if it is like this with you, but maybe you get a little fascinated with some kind of technique or some kind of thing, and then you use it too much maybe, or you use it a lot, and then hopefully you put it aside, you get better at it, you make it effective, and then you put it aside, and then maybe 5 years down you use it just at the right moment, just when it could be the most effective, you know. And
Yeah.
I think that's kind of the goal.
Juni, I saw you smiling and nodding at one point.
Yeah, it's just the thing I mentioned about how some reviews of Monkey Meat are like, I don't know how to explain what this is.
Sure.
I've noticed that it happens to my work a bit, like quite often. And especially on the French market for some reason, like there's a French expression, it's out of the box, but it generally means I don't know what to do with this. And it's one of those things where like I think it's quite easy to get a bit anxious about that, but maybe for me it's a strength, I don't know. So I know that when I started my career, I wanted to avoid being the black guy.
Sure.
Because I could tell like which types of jobs I was being offered when I showed up. Like the first few things that I was set my way, especially on the corporate side of things, I think I successfully managed to like show that I am black, but I'm not just that, and you can give me all types of different things. Now it's more about I'm not just the boy wonder guy. The same way that Deniz doesn't want to be the political ultimates superhero guy. I'm not just the boy wonder guy where like I think I've been tied to Damien in a way that like for now it's nice. Long term, I wanna make sure that it doesn't become a trapping box.
I've been introducing you as Juni Boy Wonder Boss, so I hope that's okay. I guess I should stop.
Well, yeah, like it's. I love that book. I love
I'm just kidding.
What it was. It's just you never want to be in a specific definition, I guess.
You don't want to be pigeonholed.
Yeah, because like, what if you want to do something else at some point? Something that's so out of left field compared to the thing that you did before, like, and everyone around you is like, but that's not what we expect from you because we think you should be doing this thing specifically.
Yeah. I relate to that. It's even a thing. Sorry, Matt.
No, go ahead, Tyler.
It's so in doing all the press that we've all been doing for our book. Somebody asked me, they're like, "Oh, why did you want to do horror?" And it was a question I'd never considered being asked. Like, why would you want to work in this genre? Which is like such an obvious question, right? Like, why would? Oh, what about this? It's just a thing where I'm like, oh, well, why wouldn't I want to work in any genre? Or why wouldn't I want to? And there is an interesting thing where they kind of like, oh, well, you're kind of known for drawing books about, precocious children. Why would you want to draw, write a book? And like, in doing so, I was like, oh, well, even the main character of my book is known for one type of writing, and he's actively trying to be a different type of writer. Yeah. And it's a sort of thing where I think you're right, Juni. Like, there is a thing within our industry where, and I don't think it's done maliciously a lot of the time. It's just a thing where humans like to put things in their little box to keep them in order. But we as artists, all of us have to kind of push against that. Like, it's a thing where it's like you almost like, unless you're happy just being the political guy or just the Damien guy or whatever, then like, great, Dan Slott seemed to have a really good time being Mr. Spider-Man. But like, but it's things where it's like you can see, I don't know, just wanting to be able to play with any, not use the toy box term, but just like, being able to be mobile between.
It's funny because I try and jump genre and jump storytelling and all those things too, and I'm always happy to do it. Like, if you think about like a lot of screenwriting or film directing or novelists, like they're one type usually. Like Stephen King had to come up with a pen name to be like, this one isn't horror, and he was the most famous writer in the world, and they were like, you have to have a pen name. And like, I think that a lot of the directors that really speak to me are like, Stanley Kubrick or even Spielberg, or people who are just like, I don't do the same genre twice in a row. Like I'm going to move around. And that really speaks to me. But then I was in LA earlier this week, and I saw Ed Brubaker for a little bit, and I caught up with him, and he was talking about the Criminal Show, and it was very exciting, and I'm very excited about it. So I was nerding out with him. And I had this overwhelming wave of jealousy for not that he has a TV show or that he's like a much better writer than me. Like I'm jealous of all those things in a different way, but like Ed and Sean Phillips are so locked into what they do that they are the name in that genre. They are like, when you say a crime book, the first thing anyone's gonna think is that. And it's not something I do or ever try to do, but I do see it and go, it's pretty cool. Like I'm pretty jealous of it. And so I don't know. I don't disagree with you guys, but I'm curious why. I guess I see the other side too.
If you're happy doing it, then do it by all means. It's just a matter of whether you will be creatively satisfied that way. And if there's something wrong with being a crime writer who has like 120 crime books and is like a household name, in that group of fans or whatever, like there's nothing. It's not a moral judgment or anything like that. Or it really is just what I know would interest me. And I would not be happy doing anything like any genre. I don't believe in genre, really. I don't acknowledge it as a real thing. I think I just don't. I think the best work is when you describe your work, you describe like 4 or 5 different genres. Any book that you do, right, for a reason, because life is it's funny, sexy, sad, sweet, action packed, horrific.
Sure.
It's all of those things.
Yeah.
And if what you're trying to do is capture a piece of life and put it onto the page, which is the douchiest way I could have said that, then you need all of those things, or as many of those things as you can get. And so I think, like looking at Brubaker and Phillips, like they do crime books, I guess, but and that is true. That is a good description of it. But it's all human. It's all pretty human stuff and focus on human stuff. And so I imagine, like they feel the difference. But as long as they're happy doing what they're doing, if you want to just be the political superhero guy, there's nothing wrong with being the political superhero guy. I don't mean to shit on that. It's just
oh yeah. Now I'm like going through. I'm like imagining if Agatha Christie wrote like kaiju books or something instead of just like closed door mysteries.
She might have. She might have. She's in publishing. I would love to keep talking to you guys, but I think we've taken up enough of your time. I feel like this is maybe a good place to end it.
It's a great place, Matthew Rosenberg. Not to freak anybody out, but we've been here the whole time.
Peeping Toms.
And real quick, before we do wrap up, some nice little messages in the chat. Fifth Dimension Studios says Griffin's beard is immaculate from his brief appearance earlier. Very kind.
I know it.
That's the comments you're reading to us?
Owen's review says, what an assortment of talent here tonight. Justin says, I'm a big fan of everyone here from the 4 Kids and Maxwell's Demons days. Huge inspiration on my own work. Thanks for the entertaining chat. James says, I need to say that I love this and everyone here. JJ says, beards, beanies, and books should be this episode's title. Also refers to us as the Silent Supples. You know it. And Aiden says, thanks to everyone for this great conversation. Can't wait for the new books. Now listen. All right, we get it. You guys have 4 wonderful new books that everybody should check out, but I'm going to ask you to do something highly unusual. To close this out, we're going to go around and you're going to say the name of your book again so people can go order it, but you're going to give the anti-recommendation. You're going to say who shouldn't check out your book. Of the thousands of people watching and listening right now, maybe even millions, who is the guy in the audience who should not touch your book with a 10-foot pole? And we'll go clockwise here. So Juni, you're up first. Who should not read your book?
Okay, so first of all, this is
pressure's on.
So my book is Monkey Meet the Summer Batch. It's coming out March 5th, so next Wednesday. This Wednesday. And you shouldn't read the book if. Let's see. What can I say that doesn't sound like too inflammatory to the point where your channel?
That's perfect.
I feel like even this is enough. Like, it says what it
Love
needs.
a little mystery. Yeah.
All right. You know what, Matt? You're up. Now you.
We're not going in an order.
No, it's actually impossible to go.
Keep you on your toes.
We're in 2 rows.
Still a clock. You can have whatever.
No, just go, Matthew. It's all right.
It's fine. My book is called "We're Taking Everyone Down with Us," and it's out September 26th. Mm-hmm. I think that people Jesus, this is such an awful question. You guys suck.
I didn't know I asked for the hardest thing imaginable.
You know, I'm just gonna say I don't want dickheads to buy my book. Like that's just it. I just the world has so many shitty people.
Mhm.
I don't want to make things for shitty people. Like if you actively are someone who's like gets excited about cruelty and just seeing people have misfortune, like go read something else. I don't make stuff for you.
Okay, interesting. Tyler Boss.
My new book is called You'll Do Bad Things, out March 26th. And you shouldn't read it actually mine's really easy. If you don't like horror books, you shouldn't read it. There's a lot of people getting stabbed and hung and strangled and skinned, and it's mean. It's a really mean book.
So if you like cruelty, check out Tyler's.
So the people Matt was saying, come check out.
Right. Okay.
Cruelty with a purpose.
We got like a lot of options here for people. I like that. Dennis, you want to end us out?
Absolutely. My book is Assorted Crisis Events. It comes out March 12th. And if you work in the White House, you should not read my book.
I don't think they can read, Dennis. I think you're safe there. I don't think I even know how to read, brother.
Hell yeah. Perfect. Thank you, everybody who joined to watch us live and drop in comments and everything. Thank you to everybody who's listening to the recording. You're going to get an extra little recorded segment after. But for the people here with us now, goodbye. Thanks. See
Bye.
You.